From his parents' house in Tucson, Arizona, Robert John Bardo wrote letter after letter of devotion to actress Rebecca Schaeffer. The letters were his way of reaching out from the boredom and insignificance of his young life. The often unemployed 19-year-old was on the cusp of manhood, but going nowhere. If Robert's world was constricted, Rebecca's was wide open. Independent and talented, the 21-year-old toiled eagerly at her craft and had already been rewarded with a small measure of celebrity. If Rebecca and Robert shared anything, it was a gritty determination. She wanted to be a successful actress. He had to connect with her. They both succeeded. Rebecca Lucille Schaeffer was born November 6, 1967, in Eugene, Oregon, the only child of Dana, a writer and college instructor, and Dr. Benson Schaeffer, a child psychologist. After spending her early years in Eugene, the family moved to Portland, where Rebecca attended Lincoln High School. There, she joined the Talented and Gifted program and was elected student officer. She talked of becoming a rabbi, since she was raised Jewish, but by her junior year, she was swept up by the idea of a modeling career. Her hairdresser put her in touch with a modeling agency. Soon, she was appearing in department store catalogs, modeling back-to-school outfits. In 1984, after a summer internship in New York City, and with her parents' permission, she decided to stay in the Big Apple, intending to combine a full-time modeling career with a final year of high school. Yet, in a town where aspiring models are in abundance, Rebecca failed to make a dent. Living with several other models in a 2-bedroom Manhattan flat, she struggled to build a portfolio. At 5'7", she was 2 inches shorter than the standard minimum height for fashion models. To strengthen her resume, she went to Japan in 1985 for a brief modeling stint. Enduring more rejection over her height, it ultimately dashed her hopes of making it big in the industry. When she returned to the States, she threw herself into acting. She found roles quickly, first in a minor walk-on in Woody Allen's comedy Radio Days, then a temporary part on the soap opera One Life to Live. But since they weren't paying the rent, she then had to pound the pavement looking for a waitress job. As she returned to her apartment one day in 1986, she found a note from Warner Brothers on her door. It was a request for her to audition for a TV series. The producers of My Sister Sam, the new project, were looking for someone to play Pam Dauber's sister and had seen a videotape of Rebecca. She won the role of Patricia Patty Russell, a free-spirited teenager who moves from Oregon to San Francisco to live with her 29-year-old sister, Samantha, or Sam, a photographer, after the death of their parents. She even lived with Pam and her husband, Mark Harmon, for the first few months during filming. The co-stars became very close. Pam also gave Rebecca some safety tips to protect herself from people being able to easily find her, like not putting her full name on her mailbox. The show was initially a hit, setting Rebecca up for the opportunities to be on the covers of 17 magazine and TV Guide. However, halfway through its second season, in the spring of 1988, the show was canceled due to falling ratings after being moved from a great time slot on Monday nights, sandwiched between Kate and Allie and the Bob Newhart Show, to Saturday nights, up against the facts of life. After My Sister Sam, Rebecca had supporting roles in the racy big screen farce Scenes from the Class Struggle in Beverly Hills, TV movie Voyage of Terror, The Achille Lauro Affair, motion picture The End of Innocence, and the television film Out of Time. According to police and neighbors, Robert, the youngest of 7 children, was moved through several states growing up. Neighbors said that he would flip obscene signs at them as he passed in the streets near his home and rage at them for no reason, causing one neighbor to label him a psycho. He'd also spent some time in foster care, but ran away, ending up in a psychiatric hospital. Over the last 18 months, he'd been arrested 3 times. In the most recent episode, he pleaded no contest to charges of disorderly conduct and domestic violence, and he was sentenced to an unsupervised counseling program in which he never enrolled. In the middle part of July 1989, neighbors attending a Mexican-American celebration for a 15-year-old girl across the street from Robert's home were suddenly confronted by him. He cursed the men, telling them to go back to Mexico. According to a guest at the party, Robert then made a threat that if they didn't shut up, he was going to get his .357 Magnum and shoot them. The previous June, a determined Robert appeared at a Tucson detective agency. He'd read accounts of how a stalker had easily obtained the address of actress Teresa Saldana before stabbing and nearly killing her in 1982. He'd studied celebrity stalkers. He'd even visited the apartment building in New York where a deranged fan had murdered John Lennon. According to an agency official, he came in carrying a folder containing several letters from Rebecca and a glossy photo that, her parents later verified, she had sent to him as a gift to a devoted fan. He told one of the investigators that he needed to get in touch with an old friend, coming off as an acceptable client and seemingly legit. Robert paid $250 for their efforts in tracking Rebecca's address down, which included using California computer databases and motor vehicle registration information. Now he knew exactly where to find her. Robert had actually already made several trips from Tucson to Los Angeles in a futile effort to find Rebecca. He'd once taken a Greyhound to LA, rented a cheap hotel, and found his way to the Warner Brothers lot in Burbank with flowers and a teddy bear. A security guard barred his entry, drove him back to his hotel, and told him to go home to Tucson. Robert, however, remained fixated on Rebecca and felt personally betrayed when she appeared in a love scene in the film Scenes from the Class Struggle in Beverly Hills. Not surprisingly, Rebecca was not the only young female celebrity he developed an interest in. He tried to find pop stars Debbie Gibson and Tiffany, as well as Samantha Smith, a young peace activist who made headlines when she corresponded with Soviet leader Yuri Andropov and traveled with her family to Moscow as his guest. Just prior to his next trip to LA, Robert wrote his sister in Knoxville, Tennessee, to say that he had an obsession with the unattainable and he had to eliminate it. Despite the information gleaned from the detective agency, upon his arrival in the city on July 18th, Robert began canvassing the neighborhood near Rebecca's apartment just after 6 a.m. Several hours later, he called his sister. He told her vaguely of his plans, but not enough to let her understand his intentions. When Rebecca's door buzzer rang at 10:15 a.m., she wasn't exactly prepared for it, as she was still in her bathrobe. Her clothes were laid out for an audition later that day with director Francis Ford Coppola, who was casting for a female role in a planned production of Godfather 3. The script was actually supposed to be dropped off to Rebecca at any minute. Since the intercom was broken, she went down to answer the door. Robert pulled the .357 Magnum his brother had purchased for him from a plastic bag and shot Rebecca once in the chest. A half hour later, she was pronounced dead at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center, and Robert was on a bus back to Tucson. At the time of her death, Rebecca had been stalked by Robert for 3 years. After the shooting, a neighbor who'd come out of his home after hearing what sounded like a car backfiring reported seeing Robert dash down the alley, ditch his gun and holster, and pitch his excess baggage up onto the rooftops. His yellow shirt landed above a cleaner's, and tossed onto the roof over a rehabilitation center was the familiar red paperback copy of the novel The Catcher in the Rye, also the choice of John Lennon's assassin, Mark David Chapman. Tucson police arrested Robert the next day as he ran in and out of traffic on an interstate highway in a suicide attempt. He put his head on a squad car and sobbed, saying he'd shot someone. 1 year later, as he was still awaiting trial, a set of interviews he'd done since his arrest were published in Portland, Oregon newspaper, The Oregonian. Robert told the newspaper that his obsession with Rebecca began in 1986 with a fan letter after seeing her co-star in My Sister Sam. He made it clear that his infatuation with her dominated his life. He videotaped every episode of the show. He clipped and kept photographs of her. He composed musical lyrics about the fantasy relationship, all without ever meeting her. He also said he feels guilty about her death, still loves her, and wishes she were alive. I really feel kind of guilty about all that's happened. My feelings for her were uncontrollable. I was a fan of hers, and I may have carried it too far. LA Deputy District Attorney Marcia Clark, later known for her role as lead prosecutor in the O.J. Simpson case, prosecuted the case against Robert. When it began more than 2 years after the incident, she had to prove he was guilty of first-degree murder, with an enhancement for lying in wait, which would send him away for life. Robert's public defender argued for second-degree murder, saying he had acted on impulse rather than with premeditation. If that argument prevailed, he could one day walk free. The prosecution zeroed in on Robert's videotaped jail interview with world-renowned forensic psychiatrist Park Dietz. Under questioning, Robert said he'd come to LA with a mission, but he seemed amazed that Rebecca had answered her door. He showed her the letter she'd sent him and an autographed photo. He told her he was her biggest fan. She politely told him she had an interview to get ready for, smiled, shook his hand, and told him to take care. After Robert left, he stopped in at a nearby diner for a bite to eat. When he finished his meal, he decided to return to Rebecca's apartment. He claimed he'd forgotten to give her another letter and a CD he had brought for her. This time, he said, she seemed annoyed. She said, "You came to my door again." It was like I was bothering her again. "Hurry up, I don't have much time." I thought that was a very callous thing to say to a fan. He then told her, "I forgot to give you something," and shot her. He even mimicked pulling out the gun.
I grabbed the door. Gun still in the bag. It was drawn, grabbed it on the trigger. This. Blood hit her here. She's just screaming. Why? Why? She's screaming. She's just straight screaming. Why? Why?
His defense attorney portrayed him as a victim of mental illness and parental neglect. The psychiatrist testified that Robert was, quote, a sick young man, end quote, who suffered from schizophrenia and wanted to be famous. In addition, the idea that the song Exit by U2 having an influence on Robert's actions was brought up. The defense even played the song in the courtroom. His high school counselor quoted letters Robert had written in his mid-teens. The people at school did a good job of stopping me from killing myself. They made a mistake because they saved the devil. Now the devil must kill. I'm going to be the next Hitler. The prosecution argued that Robert killed Rebecca for fame, and that he had not been under the influence of any command delusions, such as voices ordering him to take her life, when he gunned the actress down. The judge agreed that Robert, who waived a jury trial, had lain in wait, saying he may have had schizophrenia, but his condition did not preclude premeditation. The judge gave him life without the possibility of parole. At the time of her death, Rebecca was dating director Brad Silberling. Her death influenced his 2002 film, Moonlight Mile, about a man's grief after his fiancée is murdered. Also as a result of the incident, in 1990, California became the first state to pass an anti-stalking bill. That same year, the LAPD created the nation's only unit solely assigned to investigating stalking cases, and California lawmakers greatly restricted public access to motor vehicle records. Rebecca's parents became active in campaigning against handguns and gave their support to legislation to protect addresses listed in official records. They also filed a wrongful death suit in Los Angeles against Robert's family, the private detective that he paid to track her down, and the Tucson gun shop that sold the murder weapon. Among other allegations, the suit said Robert's parents knew that he had threatened to harm Rebecca, but failed to warn her or keep him from carrying out his threat. From his cell at Avenel State Prison in Avenel, California, Robert Bardo, now 54, is attempting to refashion himself as a helpful expert in the psychological derangements he came to embody. In January 2024, he wrote to Joseph Delu, a Laguna Hills private investigator and threat assessment expert he saw on a TMZ special about Hollywood stalkers called Obsessed and Dangerous. He wrote, "I am in prison for an infamous notorious case involving Hollywood. I wish to, with your permission or consent, to correspond with you on this issue of stalking behavior to offer my insights the best I can." He continued, "I had tried contacting the LAPD Threat Management Unit and they did not respond, even though I am the reason they exist. A stalking case is like an asteroid on its way to Earth. Your efforts are like the little gravity nudge that safely changes its trajectory way before impact. Many stalkers latch on to their delusions the way Linus clings to his comfort or security blanket in the Peanuts comics. It is the maladaptive coping skills to their lives. It is frightening." Joseph said it's possible that Robert does have a sincere interest in shedding light on the mentality of stalkers, but it would be impossible to know unless he talks to him. While he has considered it, he's cautious of Robert's name being in the headlines, turning him into a celebrity once again.